Hello, I'm Stuart Winter, the platform architect and developer of the port of Slackware to the ARM architecture. And with me, we have Slackware ARM contributor Brent Earle. Hi, Brent.
Hello,
How are you?
I'm doing okay.
Good, me too. Because this is the season 2 finale of the Slackware ARM podcast. And I thought, what could be a better ending to this season than with the release of Slackware? So in this podcast, I am really excited to announce that finally Slackware 15 for ARM 32-bit is available. So Slackware ARM 15 is the third official port of Slackware to the ARM architecture, and I began this port in July 2016. The baseline architecture here is ARM v7a. In a nutshell, you can simply think of it this way. It's boosting performance by offloading floating point operations into the hardware. So with Slackware ARM 14.2 and earlier, all of the hardware floating point operations were conducted in software. So that significantly hampered the performance there. So you'll get a performance boost with this version of Slackware ARM. Slackware ARM 32 bits also received the benefit of a huge amount of work over the last year, coming from the AArch64 or ARM64 port. I've rewritten the kernel module loader. I've added a debug shell into it to help onboard new hardware models. There's also a brand new tool I've developed called the OS initRD Manager, which allows you to easily maintain and manage customizations seamlessly across the kernel package upgrades. So Slackware ARM and AArch64 has a generic initial RAM disk, which caters for all of the hardware models that we support. And this tool simply allows you to have your own customizations to control both not only just loading kernel modules, but also to control specific events within the boot process itself. So you can get, from a user perspective, I've really thought about, because I've been developing the operating system along with Brent, and Brent's been using it and figuring out where he got stuck and where he needed some extra support. So I've built in the additional hooks into the system to allow you to control it, which has helped Brent also onboard Slackware AArch64 onto the Raspberry Pi, for example, while I was still working on the Rockbro 64 support. So there's lots of different hooks that you can control very easily at the user level to just get into different parts of the systems to really take control of it during the boot process. Because obviously, those of you who are not familiar with ARM, it is a bit different from the x86 world. So there are little pockets of the operating system and a kernel that you need to get in and sort of build for yourself. So the new kernel module loader allows you to do that really easily and maintain all of those local customizations even when you upgrade the kernel package. So you'll be able to upgrade the kernel package and your customizations will persist with no manual effort whatsoever, apart from the initial configuration. But even for the hardware models that are officially supported, you don't need to do anything. And that's the case for ARM32, and it is the case for ARM64. There's also been improvements with the installer. There's been loads of bug fixes and improvements throughout the entire operating system. So I fixed many of the bugs that were in the 32-bit version that bothered me, and I've improved it significantly. So I'm really, really pleased with all of the work that I've done on the AArch64 port that I've also been able to directly realize in the 32-bit version as well. And thanks, Brent, for testing many of these changes in AArch64 before they were merged into 32-bit ARM, because that really helped there to know that what I was pushing out was good. So thanks for that.
I'm the guinea pig.
Indeed you are. You're the only person in the world who's ever run one of my kernels before I even booted it.
Oh, God.
So it's been really good to work with you over the last, year and a half, or was it 2 years already? I don't even know.
Yeah, it's like 2 years on and off. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's really helped both for the AArch64 port, of course, but also for 32-bit support. So when I first started porting Slackware to the ARM architecture in 2002, the landscape was really quite fragmented, and many of the core components, such as glibc, the kernel, the tool chains, they were really sort of held together with a multitude of patches produced variously by the Debian ARM team and various individuals, who I'd met on the scene back then, because ARM really was just for RISC-OS and some variants running on set-top boxes. And then wind the clock forward 20 years, and ARM, I think, really now is a first-class citizen in the Linux ecosystem, Brent. I mean, I don't know about you, but that's really what I think. That's what I see.
Yeah, it's up and coming, and a lot of people are using it.
Mm.
So
Yeah, and to me, it's really matured to a state where there are only really a handful of patches that you require, and for most of the components on the operating system. And since this port of Slackware for ARM v7 began, I've taken most of the major kernel upgrades, and with one exception on AArch64, all of those kernels worked first time. Whereas previously, in the Slackware 14.2 era, 6 or 7 years ago, that wasn't the case at all. I'd upgrade kernels, and most of the time they wouldn't boot, and I would have to go and fix them and maybe apply a patch or change something in a config. But the consistency now in the Linux kernel is amazing. It's such to the point where when I take Linux 5.16, I'm sure it'll just work. I also want to thank the Slackware ARM community for your involvement with contributing all of the bug fixes and testing and feedback in all its various forms. And thank you to the Slackware core team that we've been working together for many years now. And it's been really good to work with you guys for such a long period of time, on a shared vision, on a shared project. And thank you to the Slackware community at large for contributing all of your help, because all of that work from the ARM community and the greater Slackware community goes into the ARM port and just makes everything better. It really helps keep Slackware alive and maintained, and keeps it in that position as one of the most stable and Unix-like operating systems available. So as far as I'm concerned, this is one of the best Slackware releases that there's ever been. I know it's been a long time coming, but it's been worth the wait. This project is made entirely possible through your support. Last year, a large amount of my 10 to 15-year-old hardware, the infrastructure hardware, the x86 servers, some of the ARM build machines, hard disk drives, network equipment, and that kind of thing, all of that consisted of pretty much a mixture of recycled machines and donated things and a few things that I bought new. And most of it died in quick succession, I think primarily because of power fluctuations. With your support for the project, I was able to buy 2 UPSs and replace a number of the hard drives that had died, and replace a couple of the servers, and some of one of my monitors broke as well. So thanks a lot for that. That support's been vital to being able to keep the project viable. So if you like what we're doing here, visit the URL on screen and you can see how you can support this open source project and keep it viable, keep it going and maintained. And as always, the continued development of the ARM port of Slackware is dependent upon Patrick Volkerding's Slackware. So please donate to that first, because that's his income source. Whereas for Slackware ARM, it's really about keeping the project viable from a hardware and running costs. So please donate to Patrick first and Slackware ARM afterwards if you can. Okay, so how do we go about getting and installing Slackware ARM? Well, the first thing to do is to head over to the arm.slackware.com website and click on the installation link in the left-hand side menu. This will take you to docs.slackware.com. So this is the official Slackware documentation website, and there are many different articles on here and helpful how-to documents and that kind of thing. So I encourage you to go and have a look around there if you need any help with configuring Slackware. Okay, so the documentation for the stable release of Slackware 15 is available here. So just simply click on the Slackware 32-bit ARM 15.0 link. And here you'll find the installation documents for all of the directly supported hardware models. Directly supported means that Slackware ARM works out of the box, and you can follow a prescribed installation path and it will work for you. For Slackware ARM 15.0, there are 3 main hardware models that are supported. We've got the Banana Pi and the Banana Pi Pro, or the BPI-M1 as it's now called. These use the Allwinner A20 SoC, or system on chip. And we then have an Orange Pi, which also uses the Allwinner A20 SoC, and that's the Orange Pi version 1.2. The next one is another Orange Pi, but this is a more powerful Allwinner H3 chip. And these are the ones that are used for the Slackware ARM build machines. So one of the main ones here is the Orange Pi Plus 2E there, which has 2 gig of RAM. And you most likely, if you're going to buy one, that would be the most likely one that you'd want to buy. Okay, and the installation documents, as you can see, are all linked down here. So for example, if I want to look at the installation documents for the Banana Pi, simply click on that, and then you'll see the installation guide here. So if you want to install Slackware ARM on your Banana Pi, simply follow this installation guide to the letter, and it will work for you. So let's talk about upgrading for a moment. Ordinarily with Slackware, you can perform an in-place upgrade, and you can upgrade to the latest Slackware version whilst the operating system is still running and reboot back into the newly upgraded operating system. However, with this version of Slackware ARM, you cannot do that because the previous stable release of Slackware ARM, which is version 14.2, as I said earlier in this podcast, this is a new port of Slackware, and there is no backwards compatibility between the ABI that's used in Slackware ARM 14.2 and Slackware 15.0. So that means that you cannot perform an in-place upgrade or a live upgrade from Slackware 14.2 to 15.0. So you will have to perform a fresh installation, which, to be fair, is something that I always do anyway. For example, I'm going to upgrade all of my Slackware x86 machines once I finish this podcast and get those onto 15.0 so I can get all of the toolchain updated, ready for the new Slackware current. And I always do a fresh installation. That's simply because there are many files that tend to fall outside of the package management tools, and you end up with lots of old stuff on the file system in the end. So I always like to have a fresh installation anyway when I do Slackware. Additionally, it could be that your hardware model cannot support Slackware 15 at all. So this machine here, Zayden 142, is the stable builder machine for Slackware 14.2. And as you can see, the architecture is ARM v5. So Slackware 15 on ARM has a baseline architecture of ARM v7. So this machine, which is a Shiva plug, will not be able to run Slackware ARM 15.0. Whereas this machine which is a Banana Pi, one of the original ones, now called the BPI M1, this is ARM v7. And so I will be able to run Slackware ARM 15.0 on this machine. And this is my home gateway machine, so I fully intend to upgrade this to Slackware 15.0. So just to let you know, you do need to look into your hardware model to make sure that it meets the minimum requirements to run Slackware ARM 15.0. So reflecting back on it, Brent, it's been quite a long year and a half, I think, and 2 years, hard work on the AArch64 project. And it's going to be nice to have a bit of a break now. And it's got me thinking, I've really been reflecting on this as we've been readying ourselves for the release of Slackware 15. And I was just thinking, I really love maintaining this project, and it's been really good to see the community come together and help build and develop the project with all of the feedback. Lots of improvements, even if they're small improvements, they just, I think, make the whole thing better. It's the detail. It's like, you don't reinvent the wheel. You keep tweaking the wheel. You keep changing things on the wheel. It's like a gradual evolution, which is one of the things I really like about Slackware. I don't enjoy going to a different operating system when it gets upgraded. I find things here, and the next version they've gone. They've either been moved or they're just completely absent. They've been replaced, superseded by something else. For me personally, I maintain this project because it's a creative outlet, whether it's working on the distribution itself or working on the build system for the distribution, or even building these podcasts. I really love Unix, and Slackware is really the only distribution that has an up-to-date collection of software packages and the kernel, whilst maintaining as much as possible a Unix-like experience. If you want to go beyond GUIs, then Slackware is here for you. And the Slackware operating system is principally written in Unix shell script, which makes it highly approachable. Because it's simple stuff. It's very easy to understand, and to work with, and to modify. And Slackware ARM is also incredibly well documented. And with the advent of the AArch64 port, my goal has been really to create an environment where others, such as Brent, can get involved and submit fixes and improvements, which is also one of the reasons why it's taken so long to to get Slackware AArch64 out there, is because of the extra work I've gone to allow people to just provide me with a couple of text files that I can drop into the distribution, essentially. Otherwise, I could have had it out about a year ago. So,
Yeah.
and all of the documentation that's involved with that, because I really enjoy learning for myself and then putting that into, putting that learning back into the operating systems that other people can then read and also learn. So, because that's how I learned far more about using Unix and Linux, was by using Slackware and reading the run control scripts, reading the config files and all of the comments in there. So I do the same thing for here with the ARM port as well. So yeah, it's been quite a long development cycle, and it's been really good to work with you, Brent, for the last couple of years.
I've been learning a lot of stuff, and that was my goal when I started helping out. I just wanted to learn more about Linux and Unix and stuff. So,
well, you've done a good job. I'm really pleased with everything. I mean, it was so easy for me to merge in the work you did for the Raspberry Pi 4 support. I literally just took the image you got, booted it, saw it worked, took all of the config files, build script stuff, and merged it into mine, and just compiled everything, compiled the images and all that kind of stuff, and it just worked.
yeah.
So your help has been fundamental to the success of the project. I think I would have given up by now if I hadn't have had you already ahead working on the R&D for the hardware models that we're supporting there.
But now the fun part starts. We add more boards.
Ah, yeah. Well, let's get the three out. Let's get the three working that we've got so far. I'm very cautious of that. I'd rather have a small number of really well supported and useful hardware,
Yeah.
and popular hardware in the case of the Raspberry Pi 4. The first goal of Slackware AArch64 is to get the three hardware models out the door, get those tested. We've already got a couple of, I didn't tell you, did I? We've got a couple of testers already for Slackware AArch64 that have been in contact with me. So we're going to have some initial Rock Pro 64 testing. I've already got positive results back, so thanks, Greg, for testing that. And we've also got another tester working on the Pinebook Pro as well, because I got really excited when we were in the Slackware crew meeting. I got really excited with the whole release and just emailed the people that most recently emailed me and said, "Here you go, have the pre-release details, and you can get in and download it. Off you go." So I've got good feedback so far, and I'm just going to finish off the Raspberry Pi 4 documentation over the next couple of weeks and do the install guide for that. And then once I've upgraded all the infrastructure here to the latest Slackware 15 x86 64, I'll upgrade the kernel to 5.16. So there's a bit of testing going on at the moment. So over the next few weeks, I'll add a couple more testers to the Rock Pro 64 and Pinebook Pro test group. So over the next couple of weeks, I'll be sending the people who've contacted me and the patrons that have expressed an interest the details to access Slackware AArch64 so that they can test it on the Pinebook Pro and the Rock Pro 64. And whilst that's going on, I'll upgrade the infrastructure here to the latest Slackware x86 64 release, and also work on the Raspberry Pi 4 documentation and the installation guide. And finally, I'll upgrade to Linux 5.16 once I've got the stable builder for ARM 32-bit 15.0 working as well. And then we should have quite a good bit of feedback for the Rock Pro 64 and Pinebook Pro at that point. And hopefully the situation with the video for the Raspberry Pi 4 may be in a better position. I don't really know. I said previously that I wasn't particularly concerned or didn't see the situation with the video on the Raspberry Pi 4 as a blocker for release. I still kind of don't, but I would rather people didn't test that yet, and I'd rather try out Linux 5.16 first. I mean, I don't know about you. I haven't looked into the video situation since we both looked at it together a few weeks ago, but I'd like to see if there's any improvements with Linux 5.16 before I.
Yeah, I actually looked at it yesterday, and it's missing something, either a kernel module or there's just, I don't know, but I used the newest firmware from Raspberry Pi, and I use the latest U-boot, and it boots up and there's no lockups anymore, but no sound. So
Oh, okay.
yeah,
All right. Well, I mean, you can keep having a look at that. I'm not going to touch that stuff until I have completed the installation guide and all of the other stuff, because by
yeah,
then it'll probably have changed anyway. And I did test the latest version. I don't remember the number, whatever it was. The latest version as of a week or so ago of the Raspberry Pi bootloader firmware, and I can't remember what didn't work actually, but something didn't work that was fundamental. So I just reverted to the previous version, and it was all good. So I'm not I'm not particularly apt to go and retry that yet. But yeah, in a few weeks I will do once we've upgraded to Linux 5.16. We can take a look at that stuff. It'd be quite nice to get to have the latest versions if we can before giving it to people to test against the
yeah,
private repo with the Raspberry Pi 4. The main reason is because I don't want to have to go and re-architect. Well, put it this way, if I release something in a certain configuration, and then because I'm testing it, and then 2 days later, after I pushed out some updates, I realized that was the wrong route, people either then have to go and read my changelog and follow it, and in order to get back to a working state, or I need to go and write up some code to go and undo that state and move to a new one. Neither of those two things I want to do. I don't want to document how to revert to a previous state,
yeah,
or let alone write some script to go and do it. Really, I'd rather Brent just reinstalled it.
yeah,
No, I'm kidding. But no, seriously, I reinstalled it as well. So at the moment, the way it works with the private preview is that I'm expecting you to reinstall it frequently, because that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm not doing any management of significant state changes for different batches of the OS release, or bit different batches of current, if you know what I mean. So that's just
yeah.
too much. I'm not up to that.
I do a fresh reinstall every time there's an update in the changelog. So
Oh, good. Okay, you'll be getting one then in about an hour or two. So, okay. Brent and I have been talking about some ideas for a season 3 of the podcast, whenever we might start that up again. I've got some ideas. I've got, in fact, I meant to show this to you, Brent, ages ago. Oh, will we ever end the podcast? In fact, I want to show you this book. Let me share my video.
there we go. Unix shell commands, quick reference. Yeah.
Exactly. This is the Unix shell commands quick reference guide. And I thought that I'd lent this book to someone. And this is the back of it, by the way.
Yeah, I think I have that in PDF form
Do you?
somewhere.
So that book is one of my favorite Unix books. I thought that I'd lent it to somebody and they hadn't returned it. So I was a bit disappointed when I couldn't find it. I looked in the ARM graveyard, in that episode. I was there. It's got to be in here. It's not in there. And because I also don't have my VT220. I used to have a real VT220, and I was really hoping I could connect it up to a Raspberry Pi and go, look, this is a real terminal. This isn't just a software. This is an actual big fat terminal. But I threw it away, thinking, oh, I'll never use that. Could have used it to do a Slackware installation on a real VT220. That would have been history in the making. But sadly, I don't have it, and I have checked 3 times, and it's not there. But I thought I'd lost this book, but I didn't. I obviously knew I wouldn't give away one of my favorite books. I'm not that generous. But I love this book, and I've been thinking for season 3 that perhaps we might start digging into a bit more Unix stuff, because I love Unix, and I've not, I mean, the entire last 2 years, I've written more shell code than I think I've ever written in my entire life over a sustained period of time. Even in any of the major projects or infrastructure management systems I've created through the years, it pales into significance the amount of shell code I've written over the last 2 years. So I think perhaps we'll start going into more of the Unix stuff, and we can also perhaps look at some slackbuilds.org, building those on AArch64, because that's actually something you can do, because AArch64 is fast enough to take many of those packages without modification and build them. So what I'm saying is, if you've got any ideas what we could do for season 3, let us know in the comments. or on the forum, that's okay too. And you can even email me as well, moses@slackware.com. That's MOZES@slackware.com. And I am done talking, and I'm done, and it's now time to push the release button. All right, we are at the end of this episode. So that's goodbye from me.
And that's goodbye for me.
Enjoy the release, everybody. Take care.